The topic in front of me is Vedanta, how it can make interfaith dialogue more productive. Well, this is a very relevant and contemporary topic. And I cannot do justice to this topic without referring to the first great interfaith dialogue that took place in modern times. That is the Chicago Parliament of World Religion in 1893. That's the most well-known and the most extensive and the most universal platform where delegates of different religious traditions assembled in Chicago and discussed the teachings and doctrines of different religious traditions. To understand its significance, maybe we have to go back to the history of interfaith dialogues. Those of you who are familiar with world history will know that the first interfaith dialogue took place around 326 BC, when India was ruled by a great emperor, the Maurya emperor, Ashoka. So he assembled on a single platform delegates and representatives of different faith traditions which were prevalent in India at that time. Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism, and of course other different denominations of Hinduism. Now that was before the first Jewish migration actually settled down in India. So there was no representative of Judaism and there was no delegate of Zoroastrianism. And then the next very important attempt to bring together on a single platform the delegates of different faith systems, it took place in 1567. At that time, Emperor Ashoka was ruling in India. But that was just an intellectual idea, an intellectual construct. He brought together on a single platform different denominations of Hinduism, Christianity, mostly the Anglican Church, because there were a small settlement of English people in the west coast of India at that time, near Goa, near Bombay, to be more specific. And there was no representation of Judaism or Zoroastrianism at that time. Those Zoroastrians were still present in India. The most important attempt to create a platform where the faith leaders of different religious traditions can come together and discuss the concept of interfaith harmony, it took place, as I mentioned, in 1893 in Chicago. And America had this glorious opportunity. It's a new continent, relatively a new country, a new civilization, but it had the unique privilege of bringing together on a single platform leaders of different faith systems as part of the 400th anniversary of Columbus' discovery of the new continent, America. And that Parliament of Religion in 1893 is still remembered for one wonderful, interesting figure, Swami Vivekananda. So today, if you go to Columbus Hall, where this Parliament of Religion took place, you can see the inscription of Vivekananda's lecture. And you can still get small printed copies of Vivekananda's inaugural address. That's the only name that is still remembered from the figures who participated in the first Parliament of Religion. So if you attend, I didn't of course go this year, but I went in on some other occasions. So the one name that is frequently remembered and referred to in the inaugural speech in all Parliament of Religions, the one name from the first Parliament of Religion is Vivekananda. Now, what was so unique about Vivekananda's concept of interfaith harmony? The most interesting aspect of, the most important feature of his very concept of religion was that all religions are equally valid paths leading to God. There is no such thing as a wrong religion. There may be a spiritual seeker who may not be trying to practice religion in a proper manner, but there cannot be any religion which is exclusively bad. All religions are so many roads leading to the same goal. And Vivekananda later on spent 4 years in this country preaching Vedanta, and he repeatedly emphasized that this idea was not his original idea. This idea he got from the ancient Hindu scriptures. There are altogether 3 important Sanskrit statements that Vivekananda may have recited, we do not know, and according to some scholars, he did recite, but Dr. Barrow's in the proceedings of the first Parliament of Religion, 2-volume, big volume series, it doesn't refer to any of these Sanskrit statements. So it is likely that Swami Vivekananda only gave an English translation of these verses. What are these verses? The first one is Trayi Sankhya Yoga Pashupati Madam Vaishnava Miti Prabhinne Prasthane Paramidamada Pathimiticha Ruchinam Vaijitriad Ruchu Kudilanana Pasajusham Nranamego Gamis Tumasi Payasam Arnava Iva. It is a very famous statement. It is from an ancient devotional hymn, Shiva Mahimna Stotra. The idea is this: people follow different religions because the difference in their spiritual temperaments. Ruchinam Vaijitriya. Ruchi actually means taste. You may want to eat one kind of soya milk, another kind of milk, another kind of cereal, another kind of bread. No one can tell you you should eat only this particular cereal. Like that, no one can tell you this alone is the only true religion. All other religions are wrong. It is as stupid as to tell you you have to eat only this brand of bread or drink this brand of soy milk, even if it is toxic poison for you. So the Ruchinam Vaijitriad Richu Kudilanana Prasajusham Nranamego Gamyas Tomasi Payasam Arnavaiva. Ocean is one, but so many rivers empty their waters into this ocean. Like that, all religions are so many roads that take you to the ultimate goal, God realization, spiritual enlightenment. There may be the top of a hill with this spiritual enlightenment. And there may be many people who are following different trails, different roads, different paths. They are all trying to reach the top of the hill. When we are moving through one track, we may think this is the only road that will take you to the top of the hill. But when you reach the top of the hill, when you look down, you find there are thousands of trails that different people are taking in their attempt, the journey to reach the top of the hill. Another very interesting verse that Vivekananda literally translates. This is the first one, Ruchinam Vaijitriya. Second one is from the Bhagavad Gita. Ye yathamam prapadyante tan sadaiva bhajamiham mama varma anuvartante manushya partha sarvasya. Something like a statement coming from God. What God tells you is, you follow me or else no. What Lord Krishna tells you is this: those who follow different traditions, reading different scriptures, going to different denominations of different churches or temples. They're all actually trying to reach me. They may not be aware of it. So do not condemn anyone. You cannot love and worship God and hate a single insect in this world. So this is the universalism, means the oneness of the goal and the diversity of the means. Ancient Vedic statement that you can still find inscribed outside our old temple in the Filbert Street, that is Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti, that you can find goal is one, reality is one, truth is one, but it has got different names, it has got different expressions. It is a part of a bigger verse, that is Indram Mitram Varunam Agnirahu Adho Divyasa Suparna Gurudman Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti Aknim Yama Matarishwanamahu. That statement. And what it means is, you call God one name, you Muslims call one name, Christians call, Hindus call God by another name. Buddhists do not have a God, but Buddhists as a concept of godliness that is as great as God. So all these are different parts. Now, I'm going to quote a few statements from Vivekananda. It has got a deep implication to contemporary times, to our own times. And it always had a relevance for our times in the history of human civilization. One statement that Swami Vivekananda, after identifying himself as a delegate of Hinduism, Hinduism is an umbrella term. Vedanta is the most refined, philosophically and spiritually, the most sublime aspect of Hindu tradition. Now, Swami Vivekananda says, my thanks also to some of the speakers on this platform who, referring to the delegates from the Orient, have told you that these men from far-off nations may well claim the honor of bearing to different lands the idea of toleration. I am proud to belong to a religion which has taught the world not only tolerance but also universal acceptance. We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true. And then there is something else that Swamiji says. I am proud to tell you that we have gathered in our bosom the purest remnant of Israelites who came to southern India and took refuge with us in the very year in which their holy temple was shattered to pieces by Roman tyranny. I am proud to belong to a religion which has sheltered and is still fostering the remnant of the grand Zoroastrian religion. Now, there are two statements here which are historically very relevant. And many of you who have read all the 9 volumes of Swami Vivekananda may not be fully aware of the historical significance of these statements. There's a deep significance in the history of religious traditions. Now, you have to remember, historically speaking, the first Jewish migration, Jewish settlement was discovered by the followers of Saint Thomas, who was a Christian apostle, a disciple of Jesus Christ, who came to India in around 52 AD. By then, actually Saint Thomas, who came to India in 52 AD to spread Christianity, was searching for the well-known Jewish settlement, the Jewish people who have migrated from Yemen to India in 68 BC. So, that's the earliest recorded proof, historically corroborated, but there are views among historians that there were trade connections between India's southwestern coast and Israel even during the time of King Solomon and also in the 4th century BC. So the Jewish settlement, Jewish migration came in the 1st century BC, Christian settlement, the migration in the 1st century AD, Zoroastrians came in 7th and 8th century AD when Iran was overrun by the Arabs. The Persians, Persia was the ancient time of modern Iran, and Zoroastrians who were massacred, subjected to genocide, ran away, and you can still find them in India's west coast. Surprisingly, some of the most prominent industrial captains of India are actually the Zoroastrians, whose ancestors ran away from Iran in 7th century AD. Tata, the biggest, apparently the biggest of the India's private industrialists, is actually a descendant of this tradition. And the first Muslim migration happened in the late 7th century AD. According to some historians, they first started coming during the time of Prophet Muhammad himself. Remember, this is not part of invasion that happened in the 10th century AD in the northwestern frontier from Afghanistan. That's a different, they came as invaders. But in the 6th century, they came as evangelicals, as the teachers of a new faith system. So now one interesting thing is, that's what I'm going to emphasize. One interesting thing, how did India's Hindu tradition treat these immigrants? That is the important thing. That will tell you the Vedantic approach to the very concept of interfaith dialogue. I mentioned this earlier. The first migration must have happened during the Persian and Hellenic period, because Alexander was the great conqueror of the Greeks, and Cyrus, the great Persian, he also expanded his empire towards east through Persia and further to the northwestern borders of India. And then the Jews already outspread to Yemen, and from Yemen they first came, and in 68 BC the first settlement was found in India, and in 52 AD when St. Thomas came, he actually came across well-established Jewish settlements in India's south coast. More specifically, it's a place called Kodungalur. It's a few miles south of Cochin, but later on they moved, they further expanded and built their first ancient synagogue in Cochin, which you can still see today, that is still surviving in all its full effulgence and glory. Now, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to read the copper plate which talks to you about the royal grant to the Jewish chief, Joseph Rabban. It is engraved in two small rectangular copper plates. It actually goes back to 10th century AD. That's what they say. But according to Jewish traditions, it actually goes back to the 3rd century AD. But anyway, the copper plate is still there. And you know what the copper plate tells you? The Jewish copper plate is a copper plate charter issued by the Chera king of Krangunur, Bhaskara Ravivarman. And you know what he did? He granted them rights for settling all around Cochin and Kodungalur, and he gave them all rights to live there in full honor, and gave him a special privilege because he was coming from a different tradition, a different faith tradition. So many villages Many temples were granted over to them, which they used for settle down and also for worshipping. Now the inscription runs like this. Remember, this is a copper plate inscription that goes back to 10th century AD according to modern liberal historians, but according to their own tradition, it goes back to 3rd century AD. The inscription runs like this. Hail prosperity. The following gift was made by him who had assumed the title King of Kings. That's old, the Oriental self-proclamation of King's glory. And he says, Bhaskara Ravivarma, in the time during which he was wielding the scepter and ruling over many hundred towns and villages, on this day he was pleased to stay, and we are given to Isupu Irappan, the village of Anjuvaman. Anjuvaman is a particular ground, a village. A big village settlement was handed over to them. And then, together with 72 proprietary rights, the tolls of female elephants, riding elephants, lamb and tame, clothes spread in front to walk, a palanquin, a parasol, and also some special drums, so that the chief priest of this migrating community can travel from one place to another place, accompanied by his followers on a palanquin. Remember, this is the story of the first migration of Jewish immigrants to India. Now, what prompted the king to treat this stranger, coming from a strange land, eating a strange food, and dressed entirely in a different way? Because he believed, well, they are following their religion. It may be new to me. It may be totally alien to our religion. But they are truthful, sincerely following their own idea of God. So we must respect them. We need not follow another person's religion. But we must respect that the other man's religious tradition is as sacred to him as our religion is sacred to us. So, in fact, this inscription goes further. And he continues, this is the gift called prasada. So, prasada is something that you give to a devotee who visits a temple. It offered food, sanctified food. This is the sanctified food that we are going to. What is the food? This gift of villages, temples, and townships, and all the special privileges, because they are coming from a strange land. They represent a different faith system, different from our faith system. That makes it all the more important to recognize and to respect their tradition, because it is different. So we should not hate, rather we should respect it, honor it. So this actually the inscription continues. It begins Swastisri. Swastisri means hail, prosperity. It's kind of old Sanskrit expression, Swastisri. Prosperity for everyone and peace to everyone. This is the gift, prasada, that His Majesty, the King Bhaskara Ravivarman, who is to wield scepter for thousands of years. You can find a lot of proclamation like that. We are granted to Isupu Irappan, the Anjuvanam. Anjuvanam you can still find, a small village right now in the southwest coast. The place still stands, the ancient cemetery you can still find. Toys by the boat and by other vehicles, Anjuvanam gives the right to employ the day lamp, the decorative cloth, the palanquin, the umbrella, the kettle drum, the trumpet, the gateway, the arch proof, the weapons, and also his own retainers. Now, I'm just, I gave this example because when we read Swami Vivekananda's lecture, the first lecture, that means Chicago address, we may not fully understand the historical significance of this. People may think Vivekananda is talking It's a tall claim for Hinduism, not at all. Actually, he only giving a remote hint to certain very interesting things that happen in Indian history, especially in the context of Vedanta and its relevance to interfaith dialogue. Now, one may ask this question: what is so special about this approach, and what is the theological or canonical background of this approach? There is something very interesting. In Hindu tradition, there are two types of books of canons, scriptures. One, the primary canon, the fundamental scripture, the Vedas, the Upanishads. And what do they teach us? They don't teach us to worship God in a particular specific manner. They tell you there is one divine reality. That divine reality is present everywhere. It is omnipresent. It is present in everyone. And the whole world is one spiritual family. Vasudhaiva Kudumbaka. Vasudha means earth, or people living on earth. Not only human beings, the entire creation is one spiritual family. And there is God present in all of us. It doesn't mean that you are God or I am God. Frequently, many people who don't read these interpretations, or I actually want to make fun of Advaita, will tell you, Hinduism teaches you, you are God, I am God, and so on. And all these deities you find in Hindu temples, different forms. Actually, what it means, they are implying that there is a divine spark in the entire creation. And that divine spark is present in all of us. Does it mean that I am God or you are God? No. But it also means, it really means that we can manifest the presence of this divinity within us. How do we manifest? By becoming a good human being. What's the meaning of becoming a good human being? By practicing what is called the idea of spiritual oneness, spiritual unity of the whole humanity. When you look upon everyone else as non-different from ourselves. That's a real meaning of Shastram Hindu tradition. The canon or the book Hindu tradition means something that teaches you to practice a universal ethical principle that gives you peace of mind, that also does a lot of good to others. So a code of conduct that helps us to practice spirituality and also to look upon everyone as non-different from ourselves, looking upon entire humanity as one spiritual family. This is the essence of the teachings of Upanishads, which constitute the primary canon of Hinduism. The primary, the most important, the scripture that is relevant for all times, and not only for Hindus, but also for the whole humanity. Upanishads. So you find that in 18th and 19th centuries, when European Indologists, beginning with Robe, Keith, Colebrook, Winternitz, and 19th century later, of course, Schopenhauer, Max Muller, Paul Deussen, MacDonald, and others, later on, when they happened to read the Upanishads, the Vedas, these primary scriptures, they did not feel that it is the scripture of another faith system, because they could feel that these Upanishads, they talk about the spiritual evolution of all people, not only one race or one religious group, but entire humanity. So we can manifest this divinity within us by practicing unselfishness, love and compassion, a sense of sanctity and sacredness, in our actions, in our words, so that our every word becomes a sacred mantra, every action becomes an act of worship, and whole life gets spiritualized. It's a very high ideal, but this is the central thesis, the theme of the most primary, the most important canon of Hinduism. Then there are secondary books called Smritis. The primary books are called Shrutis, Vedas, or Upanishads. The secondary canon, Smritis, what do they teach? They teach all kinds of things. They contain some very high ideas, but they also contain some very, very divisive ideas. These divisive ideas were written at a time when there were violence, a lot of invasions happening in the second millennium BC, in the first century BC, and later on, there were a number of invasions from Central Asia, even from Greece, from Persia, and other places. So during these invasions and troubled times, a lot of ideas, many of them very divisive ideas, crept into these secondary books called Smritis. These Smritis are not books meant for all times. They have only contemporary relevance. And I think I was mentioning some time ago, India's constitution was drafted by a small group of eminent lawyers. And in fact, the most prominent of the members of the Constitutional Assembly was Ambedkar. Ambedkar was an Indian jurist. He was an economist, a social reformer. He was also the head of the committee drafting the Constitution of India. This Ambedkar is the most eminent lawyer India produced. He was also a great revolutionary. You know what he did? He burned the most important of these secondary books, Manusmriti. You'll be surprised. In 1927, December 21. This man, who was responsible for drafting India's constitution much later, almost 30 years later, in 1927, he literally burned these secondary books. Because those books contain many great ideas, but they also contain many divisive ideas. But in spite of all that, he was chosen by Indian government, to draft the Constitution of India. Because if you don't regard the secondary books, you are not doing harm to anyone. Because the secondary books are meant to be disregarded. Even the authors themselves proclaimed in their own book. See, for example, Vyasa Smriti is very important. Vyasa says, Sudhi Smriti Purananam Virodo Yatra Dusidatra Saudam Pramanam Syat Tayodvaidhi Smriti Vara. Those who wrote these secondary books, they themselves proclaimed in their introduction that this book is only meant for this time, not for all times. So whenever you find this book contradicts the universal teachings of the primary books, primary scriptures called Upanishads, then you disregard these secondary books. So Ambedkar himself did that. People did not find Ambedkar did anything wrong, because many of these ancient books are of no relevance. That means in every religion there should be two levels of scriptures: the fundamental, the universal, the humanistic, the spiritual, the harmonizing, the highly ethical teachings on the one hand, and certain teachings which have no relevance beyond the particular age in which it is written. So one reason why these ancient kings could open the doors in front of the Jewish migrants or the Christian migrants or the Muslim migrants in 6th century AD, or the Parsis, the Zoroastrians. One reason why they could open their door and they practice great hospitality. They believed in universal acceptance. The reason is the primary scriptures teach that you should respect every human being, because every human being is an expression of the divine that is present everywhere. There is no stranger in God's empire. We create these man-made walls. When you look beyond and beneath the socio-anthropological limitations of scriptures, you can see certain universal, ethical, spiritual teaching. For example, if you read the New Testament, for example, Sermon on the Mount, many of these great parables, they were source of inspiration, not only for Christians, but also many of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, Gandhiji, Vivekananda, many of India's great Hindu leaders, they admired the Sermon on the Mount, the parables of Jesus, and also many of the teachings of other religious traditions, because they are universal. But there may be certain socio-anthropological elements. They are only of secondary value. They should be changed. They have to change. So one important thing that is required today is that a religious teacher should be able to proclaim in his own pulpit, addressing his own congregation, in his own church or his own temple. He should address his own followers that you should respect every religion as much as you respect your own religion. It doesn't mean that you should desert your religion and accept something else. No, not at all. But the point is, there are certain fundamental spiritual truths in all religious traditions, all religious books. And that should be emphasized. Leaving out the secondary, the irrelevant, the highly divisive teachings. But on the other hand, if you read one single book, and if you think every comma, every full stop, every word, every letter comes from God, and you should follow that today in the 21st century, there is great danger in that. There's a great danger. Because many of these teachings had a great relevance when they were originally recorded. But as centuries pass by, one after another, you find many of these teachings, they don't become irrelevant, but the relevance decreases. So, if we can, on the one hand, if we can divide scriptures into two categories, as in ancient India they did, the fundamental, the primary canon. Why are they called important, or were they considered important, the primary or the fundamental? Because they teach universal spirituality. They teach universal humanism. They teach certain ideas that can make us better human beings. They can look at entire humanity as one spiritual family. On the other hand, if any book contains things that make you angry, that make you hostile to others, that book may contain many good things, but those ideas should be considered to be secondary, because they had a value and relevance for those times, but not for all times. So one important aspect of Vedantic tradition is that they consider scriptures into two categories. One, the primary, and then the secondary. The secondary books are relevant only for those times, not for all times, and relevant only for those people among whom those books originated, not for everyone. These are secondary books. Primary books, on the other hand, are universal. So primary books contain universal, humanistic, spiritual teachings. And if you practice, you can never hate anyone. You can never be hostile to anyone because they're so universal. In India, it's called the Upanishads. I give you the example. Schopenhauer, a great German philosopher, he accidentally read a Latin translation of a very inaccurate Persian translation. That Persian translation happened in 16th century. Just a trash. But that is enough for him. Oh, this is about my own spiritual life. He was not a Hindu, he was a Christian. But when he read the Upanishads, he thought, this is my own spiritual journey. So, and also another person I often mention, Paul Brunton. This is an Englishman living in New York, in an apartment. He happened to read something about Ramana Maharshi. And of course, Ramana Maharshi was a saint of 20th century who followed these great teachings. So Ramana Maharshi also talked about this universal spiritual humanism, which is the essence, the central teaching of the Upanishad, the primary books, the fundamental books. And this man, immediately he went to India, and that is the beginning of a new life. So it has happened to many people, because these Upanishads, these primary books, these fundamental books, they are not books of one religion or one culture. They are books meant for the whole humanity. Anyone reading it, you can identify yourself as your own book. Secondary books are there, which include many aspects of tribalistic, socio-anthropological elements of those times. If you read the Old Testament, plenty of bloodshed. And if you read Mahabharata, lot of fights going on. But people consider only literary classics. If you War and Peace of Tolstoy, like Mahabharata. Mahabharata contains a lot of great spiritual ideas, like Bhagavad Gita. It's a universal scripture. The essence of Upanishad you find in the Bhagavad Gita. But Mahabharata is so big. It's more than 100,000 verses in the smaller version. But there are many teachings in the Mahabharata. A lot of fighting. Like if you read Homer's Iliad, something like that. But Mahabharata contains some great universal teachings. That you take. Other things are okay for literature. Nobody fights with his neighbor reading War and Peace of Tolstoy. Nobody does that. It's a literary classic. Like that, we should have a universal approach. We should emphasize, we should focus on the universal, humanistic, and spiritual teachings of scriptures and consider them as primary or fundamental books. And then there are other ideas which are relevant from a historian's point of view, which have great value in terms of anthropological, sociological perspectives, but they don't have any spiritual value. So this is the most important thing. So one important reason why Swami Vivekananda could come in modern times and talk to Americans that he is proud of Hinduism because Hinduism sheltered, welcomed the remnants of the ancient Israel right from 1st and 2nd century BC onwards. Christians in 1st century AD and Muslims in 6th century AD, Parsis in 7th century. All because Hinduism believes these primary books are, they alone are important. Secondary books are okay only for those times. That's why I told you the father of Indian Constitution, Dr. Ambedkar, who had a degree from the US, from Columbia University. He had also studied in Oxford, and he was a barrister from Inner Temple in London. He also was a graduate of St. Elphinstone College in Bombay. This eminent jurist, the father of Indian Constitution, long before he drafted Indian Constitution, he burned the most important of these secondary books, Manusmriti. But nobody bothered about it. Because the book contains a lot of great things, a lot of unacceptable, undesirable teachings also. You don't fight with a man if somebody burns War and Peace, a copy of War and Peace of Tolstoy, unless it is your book you may quarrel with. That's all. Because it's a literary classic. It contains some great teachings, but also you don't consider the book as a sacred thing that you should practice in your life unless you want to go to jail. War and Peace. Like that, many of these secondary books have only contemporary value, only relative, they have only socio-anthropological value. Other teachings we should emphasize. The universal, the ethical, the spiritual teachings we should emphasize. That is the historical, the theological, the canonic, the scriptural background which enabled the great king, Bhaskar Ravivarman, to grant this huge gift of lands and properties to these migrants. And that copper plate is still found. So I just refer to that because when we read Swamiji's Chicago address, we may not always remember the historical overtone, the historical relevance of the speech. So thank you. I made an attempt to give a bird view of this of the background of this great ideal of universal spiritual humanism with the essence of Vedanta, which certainly can give a new meaning, a new dimension to the very concept of interfaith dialogues. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu.
भक्ति बाबर दे दीदार, नाम तेरा गावा प्रभु मैं गुलाम, मैं गुलाम, मैं गुलाम तेरा। तू दीवान मेहरबान, नाम तेरा मीरा, अब की बार दे दीदार, मेहर करे फकीरा। तू दीवान मेहरबान, दादा तू दीवान मेहरबान, नाम तेरा बढ़िया, दास कबीर शरण मेरा, चरण लागे तया प्रभु मैं गुलाम, मैं गुलाम, मैं गुलाम तेरा। तू दीवान, तू दीवान, तू दीवान, तू दीवान, तू दीवान मेरा, प्रभु मैं गुलाम, मैं गुलाम, मैं गुलाम तेरा, मैं गुलाम तेरा, मैं गुलाम तेरा।
So we have announcements now. The subject for next Sunday is the symbolism of Kali worship. We have Kali Puja here on 12th November, 7:30 p.m. in the evening. Child care is provided during our Sunday lectures. On Sunday evenings, there is an online class at 6 p.m. on the fundamental text of Indian philosophy. Zoom and YouTube links are available on our website's homepage as well as in the monthly email bulletin. On Wednesday evenings, we have Vespers with meditation at 7:30 p.m. in this auditorium. On Friday evenings, there is a scripture class at the Old Temple at 7:30 p.m. Please use the auditorium entrance on Filbert Street. So please remember, we have an online class on Indian philosophical systems every Sunday, including today at 6 p.m. It's an online program. You can see the Zoom and YouTube links on our website homepage. Just Google Vedanta Society Northern California, San Francisco, you go to website. And on Friday evenings, we have a scripture class on the Bhagavad Gita at the Old Temple. It's an in-person class at 7:30 p.m. You can use the Filbert Street entrance. You and your friends are cordially invited to attend all of our services. After the lecture, there will be a question and answer session in Vivekananda Hall, and you're all welcome, so you can all proceed to Vivekananda Hall after the lecture for question and answers. I am now reading a very interesting verse from a 3rd century AD drama. They said it's an important drama, it's a play, but it is in poetry. It's called Hanuman Nataka, a very ancient one. It says, I pay my obeisance, my tributes, the one whom Buddha called Buddha, and Jainas called by their name, and different religious traditions called by their own respective names, and to him my tributes, my obeisance. That's the literal meaning of this statement, of this verse. Yam Shaiva Samupasade Shivaidi Brahmedi Vedantinu Bauddha Buddhaidi Pramana Padavakatedi Nayayikaha Arhanityada Jaina Shasana Paradha Karmedi Mimamsakaha Soyam no Vidadhadu Vanjita Phalam Trilokyanatho Hari. Actually, it's a very interesting, a very relevant statement for our context. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu.